This tutorial will teach you how to work with one of the most popular tech tools named Ansible. Ansible is an open source tool that allows you to automate configuration and deployments on hundreds or even thousands of remote servers. It is used by IT or DevOps experts, and according to today, Ansible is used more than 40,000 tech companies. It is so easy to install and so easy to use, and within only one command in the terminal, you can do a lot of things on the servers that you manage. But why Ansible is so popular on all the tech companies? First reason is that you don't have to set up anything special on the remote servers. Usually in remote management tools like Ansible, you have to install additional software called agents to perform actions remotely, and with Ansible it's not required. And also you don't have to know anything about programming to use it, so it becomes simple and easy to learn and get experience with it. So in this video we are going to do a lot of amazing demonstrations, including spinning up servers on the cloud and run Ansible to manage these servers. Let's get into it. Alright, so we are going to start the demonstrations by working with Ansible inside a Docker container, which will make us a bit easier life. And especially in Windows, you have to use a container for running Ansible actions because there is no built-in support for Windows system. If you use Mac or Linux, you should be good to go by installing the package directly to the system and play around with it. But right now, I'm going to simulate things with a Docker container for our Windows users. Okay, so I'm inside the Ansible directory in my code snippets, and then I go inside the getting started folder, and here's our Docker file that we will simply copy and paste. This will ensure running Ansible in an Ubuntu image, and so I'm only going to copy that, and I'm going to create a Docker file in my working directory. We are using Visual Code, and then I will just paste this in like that. Now you can see that by these two lines, this is going to be a container that is going to run forever until I stop it, and so this will give us the option to connect to the container and run Ansible actions. Alright, so now we are going to bring in our terminal and we will simply build this image. You can see that we are inside the directory. I'm going to go ahead and say docker build dot, and then I will give the tag of Ansible like that. And for me, it might really take a few seconds, but if that will be the first time that you build such an image, it might take between 60 to 90 seconds. Okay, so right after we have done this, then we are going to run our container in detach mode. So docker run -d, and then let's specify a name for our container. I could name it Ansible, and then I will specify that I'm using the Ansible image. This should be always the last argument, the image name. Now, just right here, we are going to specify some mounting in there. And the reason we do this, it's because I like to add some new files to the working directory of the container, but I'm not interested into working with a Vim editor or something that will make maybe a harder life for me. I like to modify some files directly in my Visual Code so that it will be also visible in my container. You can see that in the container, our working directory is /etc/Ansible. So it makes sense to mount this directory to that directory in the container so that our files will be synced. So if we go back to our terminal again, we could say /mnt C YouTube room1. This is just how I say my path in a WSL syntax. And then I'm going to mount this to /etc/Ansible inside the container like that. Then I'm going to run it. Alright, so if there are no any issues, we could actually check this with docker ps. You can see that our container is running. Now I can connect to my container by using docker exec with interactive mode. I'd like to connect to the container named Ansible, and then I am basically running bin bash to run bash commands against our container. And you can see that I'm connected to my container now. So I could go ahead and say the very first Ansible command right here. I could go ahead and say Ansible -- version. And you can see that we receive some results, and this means that Ansible has been installed correctly on this container. Now check how it says Python version. That really emphasizes the fact that Ansible is totally based on Python, and so that is why for sure it installed it as a dependency in this container. You can see that we have some more valuable information here, like the executable location where the Ansible itself is located. And I want to use a second to talk about the config file equals to none. Usually you could configure your Ansible to execute in a specific way by providing it a configuration file that is named ansible.cfg, and that has to be named the way it is. So if we were to create this file in the working directory, then it would say that the config file is the ansible.cfg, but it's a bit out of scope right now of this tutorial. You can for sure visit the documentations of Ansible to learn more about how to configure your Ansible executions. Perfect, so now let's go ahead and play with Ansible and get used to the syntax of Ansible. So any Ansible command is divided into patterns that we could follow, and it's always going to be the same. It's always going to start with Ansible, and right after that we are going to specify the group of servers that we are running against. Now since yet we don't have servers on our hand, we could simply say that we'd like to run against our local host to really practice and understand how Ansible works. And right after that we are going to specify the action that we are going to take. And all these Ansible actions are already divided into modules, and we are going to learn some of the built-in Ansible modules right here in this tutorial. So this is going to be specified with the -m argument, and then we could specify our module name. Now you could ask how I already know that there is a module named ping. So here is the documentation of all the existing modules. Check how many modules are here, right? There are really tons of modules. I think there are more than 10,000 modules already in Ansible that you could use. And if we actually control find the ping, you can see that it's somewhere here, okay? There are 37 results, but this is a module that exists. And if I run this, then you can see that we already have some interesting results on our hand. We can see that responses by Ansible is always going to be object responses, and you can see the JSON object here. So it's going to specify the server that we ran against, and then the status code, and then the object as a response. Now ping is the very basic module to check connection against target machines, so that is why we received pong, because localhost is alive. And then we could be curious about changed equals to false here, and that is one of the most interesting key value pairs that we are going to see a lot when working with Ansible. We did not really change anything on the target server. We simply checked the connectivity, so that's why nothing has been changed. But if we were to use a module to install a package on a remote server, then we would receive changed equals to true. So that is a key value pair that really helps to indicate what happened on the remote server. And that is why it exists here in the object. Okay, so after learning the basic module named ping, let's explore some more advanced modules that requires also adding some arguments for executing them. So we are going to use the module to try to create a file again on our local host. This will be the last time that we'll use localhost in order to really see how we can connect to remote servers. So we are going to, again, just for getting used to the syntax, we are going to use Ansible command against localhost. We are going to use a module named file, and here's the documentation for the file module. You can see that it is actually named ansible.builtin, but this could be avoided because there are a lot of built-in modules and we don't really have to specify this prefix. So now we could actually scroll down and see the required arguments for this module, and you can see that path is one of the required arguments here. You can already see I tried to search for the required keyword here in this browser. So if we try to pass in path, and the way that we do that is by saying -a, and then our arguments are going to be inside a string. So we are going to say path is equal to /tmp/gimtxt like the following. And then if we'd like to specify some more arguments, then we are going to follow the same pattern inside the string. Now the additional necessary argument for this file module is going to be the state, because you could either create a file, create a directory, or remove each one of these, right? So we need to specify what is the state that we'd like to have at the end. So I'm going to say here state equals to touch, like that. And you can see that it created a file for me. Now you can see that now our localhost has really changed something, because also the status has been changed from success to change, right? So we really changed something on this host. You can see that this module by default returns some more interesting information, like where we created the file and who is the group owner of the file and what are the permission modes. And you can also see that the user owner is also root here. And also you can see one more interesting thing, that the state is file, alright? So if I would want to create a directory, then I would change my command to something like this. So if we clean our screen and bring up the latest command here, the state is going to be directory, and then obviously we can go ahead and just create a folder, okay? Say that I'd like to create a folder named folder1, like this. So now if I run it, then you can see that it is a different state, but we still have a folder that is created. So this is how you create a folder. And if we were to visit the temp directory and list it, you can see that I have a folder and the file just as expected. And again, the beauty of Ansible, for now it might seem too much effort for only creating a file and a directory on my local host, but the beauty of Ansible would be the day that I like to automate this for 50 servers. The only thing that I need to do here is changing my host pattern right there and replace it with something else, like servers. I don't know. Currently we don't have group of servers. We will see how we can manage group of servers. But again, that is the beauty of Ansible. It is now going to run it for any amount of servers that you want. Alright, so now that we understood how to run some basic Ansible commands, then it is about time to understand how Ansible could manage remote servers. Now, first things first, if you remember, when we executed the basic Ansible commands like localhost -m ping, then we kept receiving some warnings. And this warning was saying no inventory was parsed, only implicit localhost is available. And that means that Ansible did not find any file that indicates the list of remote machines that Ansible is allowed to manage. So that is why we were receiving a warning. And when Ansible works against remote servers, it expects for a unique initialization file. It's a configuration file that is dedicated for Ansible, and this file should include the list of servers that Ansible is allowed to manage, so that we could give a group of servers or a single server that we want to run against. And now we are going to see how we could create a basic inventory file so that we could get the feeling of how to have a list of servers in a unique configuration file. So right here in Visual Code, I'm going to go ahead and create a file that is named hosts, like that, and that is going to be the exact name because that is the name that Ansible looks for, a file named hosts. So now right here in Visual Code, I'm going to change the syntax highlighting to initialization file, which its extension is ini, because it will help us to have syntax highlighting and it will be comfortable to write the servers that we are going to write. So now I'm going to just make up names of servers. These servers are not really exist, but just to have the feeling how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and say servers, and then I'm just going to write here gym server 01, gym server 02, or gym server 03, like that. So what that means, it means, hey, here's a new section that is named servers, and this section has 3 servers underneath. So I could either say that I like to run against servers which will run on all these 3, or I could pick up a single server name and run against that. Now, if we want to do one more example of this, then we could just again create another section which is named home, and then this will be just a shorter way to run against our local host. So I could just again make up a name like localhost, and then right there I can also specify some key values that will indicate that this is my local machine. This is how Ansible will understand that this is always my local host, and I will probably run against that for testing things. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Ansible connection equals to local, like that. And again, this means something to Ansible. That is why I am writing it. Obviously, these servers are somewhere in the cloud, so to speak. So now if we go to our terminal and we list all the files, then the hosts file is right there because it is mounted. And now I'm going to try to run again Ansible localhost-m ping. And you can see that now we don't have this warning because Ansible found the file that it was looking for. Now in Ansible terminology, the file of servers, the list of servers that Ansible looks for is named inventory. So you might hear the inventory word said a lot when working with Ansible, and basically when we say inventory, we refer to the file where Ansible has a list of servers. Okay, so now that we understood this, then let's go ahead and try to run ping against Ansible home, right? Because the home is, so to speak, our group of servers. You can see that when I say home, then it looks up for the list of servers underneath and it finds localhost, and then it executes the command against localhost. And just to simulate that, I could go here and duplicate this line, and I could say localhost 01 here, and this one 02. And now if I again run against home, then you can see that now it runs against two hosts. I know this is the same host that we are referring to, but just to understand the power of how we can manage servers under a group name like home, I am showing this simulation. Okay, so now if we were to try to run against servers, so I'm going to say Ansible servers-m ping, then you can see that it is probably going to hang for a while because these servers are not real servers. So the container obviously does not recognize these. So it is going to fail, for, of course, with unreachable for all the three servers here. Now, an argument that I really like to add to my Ansible commands, especially when we have large inventories, large inventory file, is a flag at the end that is named list hosts. This flag is always going to prevent running something real on remote servers, and besides it is only going to list the hosts that you are running against. So you can see that now nothing really happened. We did not really execute the ping command against Jim's servers 01, 02 and 03. We only listed the hosts that are under the group of servers. And obviously this is very helpful for debugging large inventories, because inventories could get to thousands of lines sometimes in companies that managing Ansible in large scale. So that is why this argument is really helpful. Okay, so now we are having the Linode page here. Linode is a very popular cloud provider that allows you to create servers quite easily. And you can see that I already created 2 servers in advance for the purposes of this tutorial. And you can see that these servers are having public IP addresses. So it means that we could already start trying to connect to them. And also worth to mention that I'm using an SSH key to connect to these machines. When you create a machine on Linode, then you can already attach to it an SSH key, and that is a process that takes really a few minutes. And in order to not spend our time in this tutorial on that topic, then I already prepared a documentation in advance that you can go ahead and take a look, which really covers how to create a Linode server and then attach your SSH key to there so that you could easily connect with your SSH key. Okay, so now we will go back to our host file, and if you remember, these were servers that are not real, but now we are going to turn these into meaningful servers. So if you noticed, I have 2 servers called 02 and 03, and I have to somehow let Ansible to understand what is the connection that is going to establish. So that is why we should come up with a new variable that is named Ansible hosts, and we should provide the public IP address of each one of these servers respectively. So that means that I'm going to go ahead and grab the public IP address of Gym server 2, and I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to repeat myself with the server 03, and I'm just going to paste this in like that. Okay, so now that we have done this, then there is going to be one more piece in the entire puzzle that we miss here. how we are going to let Ansible to understand which SSH key we are going to use to connect to the service. Currently, taking a look in the host file, there is no quite information about which SSH key Ansible is going to use, because without an SSH key, we cannot connect to these servers. So that is why Ansible comes up with options to provide built-in variables to group of servers. And again, each variable name has a special meaning to the Ansible. So if we go ahead and create here a new group with square brackets, and we say that we'd like to provide vars for the servers, see how we do that. We do with a colon and then we say vars. And then I could just go ahead and say Ansible SSH private key file is going to be the following. So I'm going to assume that we are inside the container, and I'm going to put my SSH key inside the root user of the container, inside the home directory of the root user, and it's going to be inside the .ssh, and then the file is going to be called JSC 2024-Linode. Now that is my own SSH key. Here you want to replace your own SSH key if you are following along, and that is how I named my SSH key for this tutorial. Okay, so now that we have done this, then we are going to go back to our terminal and we are simply going to try to run the container again. Now let's check that we don't have leftovers. Okay, so we deleted the previous container and we stopped it. And now we are going to bring in front our command that we used to run our container. Now see how we mount one of our directories from the beginning of this tutorial, but now we have to mount one more directory in order to bring the SSH key to be accessed to the container. We need the container to also have the SSH key, and that is why we are going to mount the SSH key that I already have on my local machine to the container itself. And the way that it is going to work is by -v, and I'm just going to go ahead and provide the mount path where my SSH key is located. So I'm going to go ahead and say mnt c users, and my username is jimde, and then I'm just going to mount my SSH directory from my local machine to the container, and it's going to be right where we specified where the Ansible key is located. And if you remember, we said root.ssh as the directory, so we are going to go ahead and say root. Let's bring this down to really compare we are not making any mistakes, and then .ssh like that. Okay, so I'm going to press on enter, and then we are going to search for our previous command, which takes us inside the container. And now we are going to take a look into the /root, and then we are going to visit .ssh. And if we list the files, then you can see that our SSH key is right there. Now with SSH keys, in order to use them, maybe you have encountered this earlier, but we need a very specific permission to the SSH keys in order to use them. So what we need to do in that case, we need to ensure and align that our SSH key has permissions only for the owner of the file. And that means that I'm going to give 600 as the permissions to the file. This is the command that allows us to change mode of a file, meaning giving permissions or taking permissions off. And by providing 600, I basically say, hey, please only give read and write permissions to the owner of the file. And I forgot the name of the file, so we are going to specify that. Okay, so now that we have done that, then we are going to ensure that our file is updated with what we edited in the host file in VS Code. If you remember, we added this section for the vars section. So we are going to visit our Ansible directory, and we will go ahead and use cat for reading the host file. And you can see that here's our updated section to provide the reference to the private SSH file. Okay, so now it is about time to test if everything works. So we are going to run against our servers group named servers, and we are going to try to use the ping module, and that will check the connection against these servers. Alright, so now you can see that we were able to connect to these servers, and these are now real servers on the cloud. Alright, now we went into full screen mode because we will start running some cool executions against our remote servers. Now say that we'd like to check a specific service on one of our remote servers. We'd like to check if SSH service is running and healthy on remote servers. So we could go with Ansible servers, and we could simply say that we'd like to run a shell command, and in the arguments we will just pass our command. We have already done this. So the command to check a status of a specific service will be with the systemctl command line. So we could say status sshd and we could run it, and you can see that I receive output for both of my servers. So you can see that active running for O3 and for O2 as well. So a good command for checking health of services could be done with that way. Okay, so obviously there are a lot of more built-in modules. You could go ahead and use the apt module, for example, to install packages. And obviously you could check for more interesting commands to run against your server. Okay, so now we are going to talk about one of the most important modules in Ansible. And there is a module in Ansible that knows to grab all the metadata about your servers. And that is useful because sometimes in Ansible, when you want to write complex processes, then you're probably going to rely on some facts about your servers. Maybe your servers are having different distributions, or maybe your servers are using different operating system distributions, meaning Ubuntu 22 versus 20. Or maybe you'd like to rely on the fact that your servers are named in specific convention and only on specific servers do certain actions. So the way that we do that is by running again against our servers, and we are going to run a module that is named setup. Setup is a very unique module in Ansible that when you execute it, it is going to grab all the metadata about the servers that you run against and check how many key value pairs that are available to us. So you can see that, for example, we could see all the mounts here, and this means all the devices that the servers are using and their disks are mounted. And you can see that, for example, here we have a description of which operating system is used. And if we keep scrolling up here, we could see more interesting information, like the internet interfaces that it has, or IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, and obviously there are more interesting information about the user that is running and much more really useful information about the whole server. So that is why setup is a very unique module. But now in that stage, we might be curious why this module is so important in Ansible. When we want to run multiple processes at once with Ansible, obviously it is not expected that we are going to type in a bunch of Ansible host pattern, then a name of the module in different sequences. It is probably a better idea to have a solution that has all the actions that we want to run in one script or in sort of one file. Say that I'd like to take a server and install a very list of specific packages and then run my application there. So in order to overcome this challenge, then Ansible comes up with something that is named Playbooks. And playbooks are basically YAML files that are defining the list of tasks that we want to run against our servers. So if we go ahead and take a look here in our VS Code, then I already prepared one YAML file in advance to show you how a minimalistic playbook looks like. So you can see that at first in the YAML file, we define what are the group of hosts that we want to run against. And you can see that right after that, it uses the syntax of tasks. Tasks will define the list of actions that you like to run. And you can see that now we start to have a new element inside a list of tasks because we have the hyphen here. And by the way, if that's the first time that you watch on YAML files, then I do have a tutorial that I really recommend watching about YAML files that you can go ahead and take a look. then you can see that we have a task named facts. And you can see that it runs the setup module. Okay, and so that is important because right after that we have another task named create file named after distribution that it uses the file module. And you already remember that we used a lot of different modules that were coming right after the -m argument. This is now the YAML version of these commands, but it is also maintainable in one single file, so we could mix in multiple actions named tasks. And you can see that I give some arguments to the file module like path, which file I'd like to create, and what is the state. State touch means, hey, please ensure that you create this file. Now, you can see that we refer to some variable that we did not see before, but from where it comes, from where the Ansible distribution arrives. Well, it arrives from the setup module that we previously execute. Thanks to the fact that we run the setup module earlier on before we run this task, then all these variables are available to us to use. So that is why the setup module has a lot of value. Well, let me show you that again with the command line interface that we already get used to it. So if we go ahead and say again service-m setup, then you remember that it's going to throw a lot of information to us. But we could actually filter this, and I could show you that if we go ahead and say Ansible distribution like that, then we are going to see an available key value pair that displays the Ansible distribution. And you can see that now we don't have a large object that we receive back, but we only have the Ansible distribution because we filtered this by. And you can see that O2 is Debian and O3 is Ubuntu. So now if we refer to the Ansible distribution variable with this special syntax with curly brackets, then it is going to use these variables respectively. And what that means, it means that when we run this file, this playbook, then it is going to rely on the value of this key here. So if we go there, then let's see how we could run playbooks in Ansible. So when we installed Ansible, not only the Ansible command became available, but also the Ansible-playbook. And you can see that it auto-completes me. So now the only thing that I have to do here is pass in the YAML file that is considered my list of tasks, which is called a playbook. So I'm going to say first playbook.yaml, and let's see what will happen now. And you can see that at first it runs gathering facts because we told it to do so. You can see that it does it, and then only after that it goes ahead into the process of create file named after distribution. But we might be curious why this process has been completed twice. Why that happened? So the reason for that, it is because when we run playbooks, unless we tell Ansible to not do so, it does this automatically, and that is why the setup module is very, very special. We don't even have to tell Ansible to run the setup module in the background in the first place. So what we could do actually, we could go to our VS Code and we could just take this task off from here, and it is going to just function properly, okay? So if we save our file and we go back to our shell, and I'm just going to say cat to read the file here. So it's going to be cat first playbook.yaml. Okay, so it took our changes. And now if I'm going to run it, then you can see that it runs gathering facts. So I really don't have to specify it because it's going to complete this automatically. And you can see that it done this process very, very nice. So now in order to ensure ourselves, then I'm going to connect to one of these machines and check if it created Ubuntu or Debian files. So I'm going to go ahead and say SSH. So I'm communicating with this server in a normal way with the SSH command line, and I'm passing in my SSH file, which will be at this location. And then I'm going to say that I'd like to connect to one of these servers. So it's going to be, let's bring in the public IP address and paste this in. And you can see that I'm right there. So if we go to the temp directory and we list our files, then you can see that the debian.txt file is right there. So we have completed a cool automation against these servers. And we also learned a little bit about how a playbook works with Ansible. Now, writing complex playbooks is a really huge skill that we should develop if we want to feel more comfortable with the Ansible tool overall. So that is why I'm going to stop here for explaining on Ansible playbooks, and this will be a complete how to get started with Ansible. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this in-depth tutorial about Ansible. Writing playbooks and learning the basics of Ansible will really enrich your DevOps skills by learning how to automate a lot of processes against tens or even hundreds of servers that you manage. So let me know if you want to see more videos on Ansible playbooks and how to dive into more complex processes when we work with Ansible. And that will be it. So if you enjoyed in here, please like this video and consider subscribing to my channel. And I will see you in my next upload.